And Tom, please start.
Great. Well, good morning and warm greetings from Ho Chi Minh City in Vietnam. My name is Thomas Nguyen, and I am the Chief Global Markets Officer for SSI Securities Corporation in Vietnam. We are the leading securities firm here in Vietnam. And timely insights to our clients, to our partners, to our friends, and even to our competitors who might be listening in. And I hope you're listening in because today is quite a treat in terms of the subject matter. Although today we are calling this lightheartedly a discussion around Trump's tantrum, the seriousness of the matter of trade, of geopolitics, of oil prices is impacting every country in the world. And I cannot imagine a more important subject and a more timely subject than today's subject that we're about to discuss over the next hour or so. And so with that, I want to introduce our speakers. Frank Kelly should be a household name to Vietnam by now. He's been a regular guest on many of our shows. And I tease Frank because with Donald Trump in the White House, I think his job is quite secure because every single day there's something for Frank to comment on. Frank is actually a good friend of mine. We've known each other for over 20 years now. Frank has spent about 30 years on Wall Street. He started his career working for President Reagan and then President Bush, and then spent time on Wall Street, really in political analysis and political strategy. Frank is currently the founder and managing director of Fulcrum Macro, a firm that he founded, and he is advising the most important clients, the most important investment management firms in the world on how to navigate politics. So with that, I'm going to start with Frank first, and then of course we will go to our next speakers after that. So Frank, look, we've talked a lot over the last few days, and this is quite a complex moment because it feels like we are trying to tackle a moving target. Even this morning, we are hearing dynamics between what Trump is doing with Russia. But let me open with a really broad question for you, Frank. Why? Sitting in DC and hearing everything that you're hearing, why did this thing start with Iran? For me, sitting in Ho Chi Minh City and being American and knowing a little bit of the matter, is it about distraction? Is it about Middle East stability? Is it about the midterm elections? Is it even about China? So I'm going to leave that to you, Frank, and then take us wherever you want to take us.
Yeah, well, thank you, Tom. It's great to be back with you, and thanks for everybody joining this morning. And thank you again, Tom, because you're the one who created me. You're the one who helped me. Your entrepreneurial spirit, it was almost 25 years ago, actually, that you encouraged me to get into doing political risk analysis to advise market participants and you and the teams that you were running at the time. And it's been a very fun and prosperous journey, thanks to you. Look, you're asking the question that not just the world was asking, but some of the most senior political people in Washington, even the most senior people within the Trump administration. There's really no clear answer as to why now, why build up forces, the large US naval fleet off the coast of Iran, which most people, I think, didn't take Trump seriously. They thought he was sort of shaking his fist, but would not take action. And that if there was going to be anything, there would be sort of a one quick hit, if you will, sort of like what he had done in Venezuela in taking out the president Maduro and his wife. It was in and out with a special forces raid. And we were done. And then you negotiate from that. And instead, it turned into as we all know, I don't have to describe it, but just a massive ongoing effort to decapitate the leader, the government, and just destroy the government of Iran, and lead and
Frank,
call.
Frank, if you don't mind, and you know, I love to interrupt you.
No, go, please.
But you know, is Trump was Trump using the same strategy on just a different target? And what I mean by that, going into Iran, was his view? Do you think that his view was this is going to be a quick and dirty move, just like what happened in Venezuela? But the unfortunate part is Iran is a different animal.
It's a that's and Tom, this is you're exactly drilling into this question. It's like, how did you not see that the Iranians are an extraordinarily resilient people that have been at war for 50 years with the United States, Israel, and just about everybody else, right? So why did you think, and they've just killed more than 30,000 of their own people who rose up against them a month ago because of the horrific economic situation there. And still they hold on to power. How did you not understand this? So it's very clear there was not any sort of massive, tight, focused strategic planning. It was Trump clearly had conversations with Benjamin Netanyahu, who convinced him this was the time to go, as Netanyahu would also participate in the attacks, right? The Israelis, and simultaneously attack Hezbollah and trying to eliminate what was left of them after the Israelis decimated them when they were going into Gaza. We have a problem now, right? We've grabbed a tiger by the tail, and if we let go of it, it's going to eat us. And right now, it's torturing, I would argue, the United States. It's torturing. Trump can't find a way out of this. There's nothing for the Iranians to lose. Nothing. And they're playing a brilliant game at this point with Trump. Now, strategically, you ask about China from Iran, but two things they clearly, as part of the planning process, they didn't figure out. The Chinese have over 2 billion barrels of oil in reserve. They could go for the better part of 2 years without oil. The second thing is nobody, the US, is not going to attack any of the tankers coming out of Iran going to China. And the Iranians aren't going to do it. So we've already seen the confirmed reports that there's at least 2 fully laden tankers that are heading to China now. So that didn't work. And if that was the case, so this is the real mystery here. And Tom, I'll give you an insight in talking to senior U.S. Treasury officials who are just stunned by this. As late as 2 or 3 p.m. on Friday, I am told, the U.S. Secretary of the Treasury and the U.S. Energy Secretary were assuring the president, this past Friday, that there would be no significant spike in oil prices. And the idea that it would surpass $100 a barrel was crazy. It won't happen. 2 days later, it happened. I mean, where was the intelligence on this? So this is one of the most frustrating things now. And you ask, this is the midterm sort of going through this. If anything, China is in a much more powerful position. We should get into that and talk about this. This is really, if there's a beneficiary to this war, it's China. The midterm elections, it's for Republicans, they're having, it's like a living nightmare because this is increasing inflation going into the midterms, and voters are angry. So again, it gets back to the very question, what were you thinking? And nobody's really
Frank,
clear on that.
And Frank, if I could ask just, you know, a ridiculous question, does Trump really even care about the midterm elections? I mean, certainly the Republicans do, but does it really even matter to Trump? And I'm just throwing this out because he's just a different animal. Is that right? So I'm trying to get into his head here.
Yes, they very much matter, Tom, because if you're sort of looking anything from predictive markets to polling right now, and we've still got a long time before the elections in November. But it looks like Democrats are going to win control of the U.S. House of Representatives. It's going to be hard for them to win the Senate, but it's getting tighter already. What's going to happen this time next year if Democrats win control of the House of Representatives? They're going to impeach Trump again. They're going to run very, very deep investigations into what he's been doing just even in the last year. and they will go back and re-examine other things. And if they win control of the Senate, they will convict him and he will go to jail. He will be forced to resign and go to jail. So this is his nightmare. And what that, again, it doesn't match up. What were you thinking, buddy? This is not gonna, if you don't plan this out, this isn't Venezuela, and it's certainly not Greenland, whatever that was about. This, you were dealing with a very dangerous animal here known as Iran.
Got it. So if I can just kind of pull us back to a little bit of the core of the subject here, what's most on my mind is from where you sit and everyone you're talking to, can you even put a timeline to this, Frank? And if you can't, what kind of signals would you be looking for? What kind of roadmap would you be looking for to give you a sense how long this lasts? Because in truth, oil being over $100 is not a big deal if it's just a quick spike. Is that right? But it's a big deal if it lasts for months or months and months and months. So give me a perspective from where you sit. I'm not going to hold you to it. How long do you think this lasts? And what kind of signals would you be looking for to either affirm or challenge your thinking?
So the only, sitting here in Washington talking to, the number of diplomats and defense officials and intelligence officials I know, the one very small light they can see at the end of the tunnel that potentially could be helpful here is there's two of them. You've either completely eradicated all Iranian missile and drone capabilities. That's not going to happen anytime soon. The other light is what the Iranians have pointed to is the prospect of a third party who could step in and negotiate and get the ironclad commitments from the United States and Israel. This is as much Israel, right? This is not two parties fighting with each other. This is a three-way fist fight. That there will be somebody, an entity that can do that. And when you look on the global stage, there's only one country is capable of doing that at this point, that has the respect of Iran and the respect of the United States and the respect of China, of Israel.
Vietnam? Is it Vietnam?
It is Vietnam, and it's you, Tom. So you're going to have to get on a plane and head to Tehran right now. It's China. And so if people are looking for a marker or a date, you have President Trump arriving in Beijing December 31st. That is what's scheduled. Now, there's going to be a quicker marker to watch in that the U.S. Secretary of Treasury, Scott Bessent, is flying now, as I understand it, or maybe he's leaving first thing in the morning to go to Paris to meet with the Chinese vice premier to talk about the agenda for the summit, which is very unusual. Normally, these things are done months in advance, months and months in advance. This is going to be a very unusual summit between Trump and Xi in so many ways that you don't have the agenda. You don't know, they don't even know what trade topics they're supposed to talk about. Now, this may be Trump trying to spring something on President Xi and trying to, do his Trumpian thing and see if they can do something to get us to at least a ceasefire. It's going to be hard. The other thing is, as the Wall Street Journal is reporting this morning, the Iranians are talking to the Gulf states, and their demands are: we want full reparations for all that's been destroyed, and we want all Gulf states that have any U.S. military bases, and there's a very large U.S. naval base in Bahrain, for example. There are military bases all over the place. They all have to go. That would be just a huge earthquake of a shift geopolitically if any of them were to agree. I don't think that will happen, but it shows how confident the Iranians are and how hard of a bargain they're willing to try and drive for.
Yeah, if you don't mind me going back to your first point, the option or the prospect of eradicating all missile capabilities, drone missile kill, you said that's not going to happen. Could do that. So help me understand why you say that so simply.
Well, first off, Iran's a large country.
Yeah.
It's a little smaller than Alaska, right? It's
Okay.
big. So
Okay.
a lot of it's rural. And
Yeah.
as I said, the Iranians have been fighting the war ever since they've overthrew the Shah against the West and many of their neighbors. They have over that time learned and actually done an extraordinary job of hiding military facilities of all sizes, right? So
Yeah.
we will, 15 years from now, 20 years from now, there's going to be unfired drones and missiles from this period. They're everywhere. They've made it very so that this very moment they wouldn't be to do that is to, right?
Got
Trump
it.
would get impeached for that because people would be so angry.
Got it. Got it. Wow. Okay. So I guess going back then to your second point on China, I think that the whole China potentially stepping in as being the peacemaker, shall we say, is an interesting perspective. And I think President Trump is supposed to be meeting President Xi at the end of this month. Is that right?
March 31st. Yes, I think he's traveling the 31st. The 31st to April 3rd, I think, is the dates.
Any color, any signals we should be looking around that, and how does that jive with the Japanese Prime Minister coming in on the, I think it's the 19th of March, before that, is that right? So help us understand if there's any dynamics between those two things.
Well, I think there's several dynamics in that. Think of if you're the Japanese Prime Minister coming here on the March 19th to meet with Trump. Prior to the Iran military action, she was hoping the prime minister was part of that trade deal.
Mm.
Apparently, it's been publicized, it's out there, is that Japan will commit to $550 billion US direct investment into the US, which the president would help guide, right? It wouldn't just be sort of a aspirational. It would be, no, Madam Prime Minister, we want to make sure that Japan builds this nuclear reactor in Tennessee, or I'm just making that up. Because of the inflationary impact of this war, you have to ask how much is the Prime Minister going to have to haircut that commitment,
Yeah.
because she's going to have to do things. Their strategic petroleum reserve being opened, dealing with all sorts of, is that $550 billion down to $300 billion now? So I would watch for that very carefully. And also the tensions between Japan and China that have really risen lately. The ultimate power here again is China, because they prepared for this with the huge oil reserves, 2 billion, and everybody else is in an increasingly weakened position. And there's not another head of state in Asia Pacific who has any idea or any better answers to how long this is going to last in Iran than the ones I just gave you.
Mm. Got it. Got it. And then look, I want to ask you one more question, then, but I'm not done with you yet. We'll be back, okay? But I want to move to our other speakers. Before the attack, of course, we were all wrapped up in tariff noise, with the Supreme Court coming down and saying that Trump doesn't have power, and then Trump, coming back with his own tariff view. Give us some dynamics around that. And it also seems like he's shifting from country-specific tariffs to more sector focused tariffs. Help me understand how to think about that and how Vietnam should be looking at that.
That's to me, right?
Yes, that's you. That's
Oh,
you.
sorry. Okay. So first off, it's quite interesting. It was, if here you're able to listen live audio to the Supreme Court, listen to the arguments of that case live. And anybody who listened to it was very clear this decision is strongly going to go against the Trump administration. Yet I have heard from a number of White House sources, the president was shocked. He didn't expect it. Wasn't a lot of planning for the alternative to that. I'm serious. And it's sort of, I don't know if this is sort of the nobody wanted to tell the big guy how this is really going to go because he's going to get mad at me for
Yeah.
delivering bad news. that's one of the reasons that he's announced a 15%, well, 10% tariff across the board, and he wants 15%, but they still have to do a lot of work on this, investigations. And long story short, not to confuse listeners here, because this gets very arcane, very confusing. He's lost a lot of power in applying the tariffs, right? He can apply the tariffs he plans on applying have, I think it's 180 days they can last. And they are, as you point out, instead of applying them to an entire country, okay, we're putting this just on Vietnam, they're more sector specific. The problem for Trump, though, is we're again to the midterm elections, all politics are local, as one famous American politician said. Those become inflationary, right? And that's another, and so talk about the bad timing of the Iran move and the bad planning of that just piles on. So you've got to get these trade deals. If you're going to be smart about it, you better get them done quickly, right? And stop having these tariffs sitting there, because the price of washing machines come voter, they're not going to be happy about it.
So I hear a potential silver lining here is that trade deals might actually happen now because of this other bigger problem going on, that Trump might be incented to close some of the deals. Is that right? Am I overreaching here?
No, I think that's exactly it. If he does not do this, I think people are going to be really wondering about him. Has he lost his complete political abilities, which were quite enormous before, right?
Okay.
But then again, there's a lot of people here in Washington sort of shaking their head. How did Trump get himself into Iran and not think this through? Right?
Got it.
What? Right? So the same thing with trade and the midterms. And again, this is very unusual. It's a question of his life or death in a sense. If he loses the midterm elections, he is going to be impeached.
Got it. Okay. Yeah, that's thank you for that, Frank. I'm gonna move on. We're gonna come back to that in a bit. Okay. So next speaker is Barry Weisblatt. And again, I think many many listeners will know Barry. Barry is actually more Vietnamese than I am. You've been in Vietnam for almost 18 years. Have worked for some of the best firms in Vietnam, most important firms and companies in Vietnam. Barry and I actually worked with each other at Deutsche Bank over 15 years ago, so I know him quite well. I am really grateful that he has joined SSI. He is a senior member of our institutional sales team, our macro specialist. But perhaps most importantly for this subject, this discussion today, Barry just spent about a week in Europe speaking to our key European clients. And so, Barry, I'm going to start with that. What's on people's minds? What kind of questions were you getting? And certainly, what perspectives are you giving them from not only your experience here at SSI, but your deep experience in research in your prior roles? Barry, if you can take it from here.
Sure, thanks, Tom. So yes, we arrived in London 2 days after the first attacks on Iran. Fortunately, Vietnam Airlines has a direct flight to London, so we didn't have to transit in the Middle East. Instead, we flew over the Russia-Ukraine border, which was viewed as safer. But we arrived 2 days after the first attack, so the Iran situation was definitely top of mind for the funds that we spoke to, but we also got a lot of questions on the tariffs as well. That we saw was that, first of all, Vietnam is not unique. The impacts on Vietnam, this is a global situation. So whatever's happening in Vietnam is not unique to Vietnam. There were questions about, is Vietnam's position relative to other countries better or worse? Of course, Vietnam is a net oil importer. We have a lot of sensitivity to Kuwait. Most of our crude comes from Kuwait. So there was a lot of questions about that. But at the same time, we don't export much to the Middle East, so lower sensitivity there. So when I talked to them, most of the investors said, all right, if this is $90 to $95 a barrel oil for a month or two, that's manageable downside risk. That really doesn't change much in our investment strategy. Of course, now we've seen spikes to 120. We're seeing now at 100, where we walked in and the investor said right off, he says, well, we've had a major dislocation. What do I buy? Where are the opportunities? So there really isn't a sense of shutting down. It's like, okay, what can I do here? And I'll leave the opportunities. I know Hung's going to talk later, so I'm not going to delve into that in detail. Jay, although surprisingly, gold hasn't done very well in this conflict, but we did talk about where are the opportunities. We also talked about the downside being higher inflation, so the consumer sector, which is really just still in a kind of slow recovery mode, being impacted by higher inflation. But it was discussion of like, what do I buy? What do I sell? Not do I exit? That's definitely not. They're definitely still active here.
And Barry, do you think? Yeah. That's also been my thinking, because I'm so trained by previous taco trades that every time Trump creates chaos, I get really excited and I look at it as an opportunity. But within every one of them, there's just a moment where I begin to question if I'm wrong this time. So do you think investors are a bit complacent like I am around the situation?
I think that, well, so first of all, you have to remember their mandate is that they're investing in Vietnam or they're investing in ASEAN, right? So they're not paid to hold cash, right?
Got it.
So they are looking, right? Yeah. They have to look for the opportunities. But I do, again, if this is a 1 month or less conflict, then I think you're right. But that comes back to a lot of what Frank said. And I know the question you want to ask Frank later is, how long does this last? But I do think, and then even you say, well, the consumer sector is getting beat up, but if that pushes down valuations and this is a relatively short conflict, then you buy that for the recovery. So I think that's the way they're looking at it.
And I guess, but as an additional question to that, I mean, we I can't remember who mentioned it, but obviously we've seen the markets in Vietnam volatile around the situation. But don't forget, our market is very retail driven, is that right? It's not clear to me if the retail traders are really thinking about oil over 100 and thinking about it the same way that an institutional investor would think about it. Do you have any insight into that, Barry? Yeah.
I think they are. And because we talk about oil over 100, Vietnam petrol prices are, of course, very closely linked to global oil prices. So they're simply looking at lines at gas stations. And this is how it impacts a retail investor. I mean, I had an experience over the weekend, I think I mentioned to you, where I ordered food from Grab Delivery and I couldn't get a delivery because no motorbike drivers wanted to drive on Sunday because petrol prices were so high, right? So if I'm thinking about retail investor mindset, if I'm seeing lines at gas stations, Grab drivers aren't driving, that hits me as so I think they are aligned with global investors. And I think rightfully, the market tanked when oil hit 120 and it recovered when oil went back to 90. So I think retail investors in the global definitely want to talk about that. So first thing, here's what I told investors, and I got a lot of nods and smiles and agreement, 10% reciprocal tariff. I mean, 2025 exports were up 17%. Exports to the US increased 28% to $153 billion. And everyone's saying, oh, it's just front loading, but like you can't front load for 8 months, right? It wasn't just thing. I mean, our trade surplus with the US increased 4%. And maybe even more importantly, dispersed FDI went up 9%. So we did very well under the reciprocal tariff agreement. And Barry, when I look at that and I say,
Barry, do you think we did well because on a relative basis, we were still better positioned than our quote unquote competitors?
Yeah, I think there's 3 reasons. And the first one is exactly that. If you look at who's our primary competitors, it's China and India. And for most of the year, China had 125% tariffs. India had 50% tariffs. So yes, compared to our competitors, we did very well. Even compared to other ASEAN countries, we were at the same level, 19, 20%. So that's the first reason. Yes, I completely agree with that. The second reason is that electronics were exempted from the reciprocal tariffs. And that's 27% of our exports, the smartphones and electronics, were exempted from the reciprocal tariff. So actually, our effective tariff rate was not 20, it was 14. Because of that exemption. And that's why when you look at the exports, the FDI companies did really well. The Samsungs and LGs did very well because electronics were exempted. So that's the second reason. I think the third reason is simply that the US does not have the capacity to reshore the products that we export. Obviously the electronics, but even garment and textile, there's no infrastructure to reshore that in any kind of short to medium term fashion. So I think those are the reasons that we did really well. So then that led me to the next question. Well, okay, now we have this 10 or 15% global tariff. What does that do, right? So again, three things. I think that the first thing, most important, is it imposes some rationality. Trump can't change the tariffs with a 2 a.m. tweet, right? You have to have some kind of a trade representative, USTR investigation or something, and you have to have some logic and some rationality to it. And this is really important for companies planning in production, for investors planning FDI. I mean, even on the other side, there was a story that came out, I remember, where when Trump announced 46% tariffs on Vietnam, there was a fisherman in Louisiana who went out and bought all new nets for his fishing boats because now he was going to clobber the Vietnamese. Thousands of dollars on new nets. Now what do I do, right? So just not having that volatility is good for everyone. I mean, or it was never options. So I think the tariffs accelerated that, but being the same tariff rate doesn't change it. So that's the second thing. The third thing is I think that the biggest risk to Vietnam under the reciprocal tariff structure was the risk of transshipment, that Trump had Vietnam's transshipment, and we're going to slap 40% tariffs on all these Vietnamese electronics. Now with China and Vietnam having the same tariff rate, that kind of goes away, because what's the incentive for transshipment if we're all paying the same tariff rate? So I think it becomes a lot harder for them to do that. So that is the way I look at it. And in summary, I think the 15% tariff is kind of a non-event for Vietnam, but I think that the reciprocal tariffs was a wake-up call for the Vietnam government that we can't rely on exports to the US to drive growth. And I think that was part of the motivation for Resolution 68, for the IFC, for the supporting to the United States.
That's why I go to tariff that I cannot wrap my brain around. There's this Section 301 investigation into unfair trade practices, which includes Vietnam. I don't know what it means. And then there's this 130% anti-dumping related to steel out of Vietnam. Can you just help our listeners just think about that and how to react to it?
Sure. So yes, two things. I'm going to start. So first, we have this new anti-dumping duty, 130% anti-dumping duty on reinforced concrete steel. This is going to sound crazy. I think of this material to the United States last year. Don't really do any damage to the so they announced that they're going to investigate 16 countries for excess capacity and unfair manufacturing practices. This is also, I think, not bad for Vietnam. So it includes China, includes Mexico, includes all of ASEAN. And the focus is on state subsidies for inefficient manufacturing, resulting in cheap products being dumped on the US. Now, China does this, right? They're infamous for state-owned factories in China that are not profitable, that they keep open because they want to keep people employed. So this is an issue for China. Vietnam, our manufacturing sector is led by the FDI companies. I can't believe that Samsung is keeping unprofitable factories open to try to name levels. It doesn't make sense, right? So the focus here definitely seems to be on China. Having said that, and I heard what Frank said, I think, just my own educated guess, at the end of the day, Trump loves tariffs, and all 16 countries under investigation will get some kind of tariff, but China will get more because the focus is on this issue of subsidized manufacturing. So what does that mean? That means we're right back to where we started from in 2025, which is everybody has tariffs, but China has higher tariffs. And so last time around, that meant 28% increase in Vietnam's exports to China. So I welcome that again, too.
Yeah, Barry, but going back to what Frank is saying, you know, again, I'm getting really wrapped up in all the details, but the Supreme Court really taken away Trump's ability to use tariff as a weapon. So how does that reality jive with what you're saying, is that he loves tariffs and he will continue to help me understand how he's going to navigate the Supreme Court telling him that he's not allowed to use it?
Okay, so now I'm delving a little bit into Frank's area of expertise, but I'll give my
Help
own.
yourself. There's more to go around than we can do with. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. So the way I read it, the Supreme Court did not say that tariffs are illegal. The Supreme Court said that Trump could not implement tariffs without getting approval from the legislative branch. So Section 301 gives the executive branch and the U.S. Trade Representative the authority to implement tariffs. So I think, you know, when Trump got over the shock of having his tariffs knocked down, he said, well, we need to find a legal way to do this because I love tariffs. I think Trump looks at tariffs and says, if I can tell the American people we're making billions and billions from tariffs, then we can have an income tax cut, right? And so he's trying to find a way to do tariffs. And 301 allows them to do this. And I don't think there's any rules as to what the trade representative's findings will be. I think that the U.S. Trade Representative has full independence to decide for itself, you know, is Vietnam, is China doing something wrong that justifies a tariff? So I think it works out okay.
But it's sector specific though, right? Yeah. It gets into specific sectors as opposed to like everything coming through Vietnam gets hit under 301.
Right. Yeah. Right. So with the sector they want to go after. But we had that exemption before. I think it was 122. I forget the exact. Yes. And everything I've heard was that exemption is carried over to the global 10%. And so there doesn't seem to be a political will to tax those. And I think, and Frank, you can tell me what you think. It's a very visible thing. If you raise the price of smartphones, it shows up in the consumer electronics store. You know, you go to Best Buy in the US, you see that right away. So if Trump is worried about the optics of higher inflation leading into the midterms, that would not seem to be a wise course of action.
Exactly.
Doesn't mean, you know, he won't, right? So maybe he'll do the unwise thing. He's done the unwise thing before, but it seems like something he wouldn't want to do.
Tom, can I just say one quick thing to this that I agree with everything Barry says.
Bring it on. Yeah.
No, but I think here's the interesting thing is you're going to see Trump go to Beijing. He needs a deal. He probably needs China to help him with Iran. But how do you now balance the geopolitical balance in Indo-Pacific? You've just had the General Secretary of Vietnam here for a very successful meeting with Trump. And that there's going to be, I think this gives cards, if you will, you know, gives some power to Vietnam. Trump, to some ways, because of Iran, well, to maybe claw some of that back, you're going to want to give a better deal to Vietnam on trade. U.S. watch for that. So these are the weird things that could come out of all of this. Again, all back to what they've done in Iran.
Got it. Okay. Well, appreciate those comments, Frank, because there has to be some silver lining here, and that's what we're kind of trying to tease out. Is that right? Because it is a complex situation, but certainly there's going to be some winners and losers, and certainly I hope Vietnam is one of the winners. So with that, but Barry, thanks for your comments. This is why I love having you on the team, man, because you do dig into things quite deeply. So and X30, again, I always feel like I never have to introduce X30 to this audience because he's a rock star in Vietnam, best chief economist, best strategist, biggest brain, I would say, and very handsome, as I always tell him. But X30, as I always come to you to bring it home, you know, you've heard Frank, you've heard Frank's perspective, you've heard Barry's perspective. At the end of the day, X30, I'm always reminded the reason we do these things is to provide insight and provide perspective to help our clients and our local partners make money or frankly, you know, manage their wealth here. So how, and I know X30 has also been talking to a lot of clients, not only globally, but locally, on how to think about all this. So what are the key messages? And ultimately, how do we make money here? What areas should people be focused on in terms of investing here?
Thanks, Tom. After hearing, I think a lot of retail investors are listening to us at the moment. And after 45 minutes, I think some of them may think, hey, I only want to deploy a few $1,000 into the market, but it's very complicated because we need to walk through a lot of like conflicts and tariff and things like that. So maybe the key takeaway for them maybe put some money on the fund certificate. It must be easier. So that joking, I think like in Vietnam, what's the key takeaway for us at the moment is the uncertainties, I think, is much higher than the previous cycle. Because like in the tariff, we can bet on things like, I don't say on the taco trade, because suddenly we got something like 46%, and we know that it should be lower. But in that situation, I think like Frank said previously, it's quite too hard for everybody to exit or walk out from that mess. So for Vietnam, I think we currently, I think like we got a lot of meeting with clients, foreign investor, even last night with the US client. So I think most of the question is not only on the too much on inflation, because I think it should manageable. It's more on whether the Vietnam can have some kind of energy shock, like we don't have, we like we have the shortage of a petroleum product, thing like that. And how about our reserve? So for me, I think the key for the investment in Vietnam, or even our growth story here, is more on the resilience of the economy rather than the headline growth number. And for Vietnam, I think we are quite well prepared for that, because not only we set the private sector like the key driver for the economy, but we also have, at the same time, we got the resolution on the state sector. And I think it's very important to keep the economy resilient, because the state sector will do whatever the private sector don't want to do at the moment. One of the key example I can say at the moment, like we talk a lot about the express railway in Vietnam, and the reason that the government need to upgrade the to develop the state sector, like we can say last week, we're thinking of upgrade our railway corporation into the economic group, so they can handle the big job like the express railway project. That's maybe the private sector think, hey, it's a little bit too big for us. So that's how the Vietnamese government want to do got more resilience from both private and the private sector and the state sector. And so yeah, when we make money from that, I think we should focus on the domestic growth driver here. And I think as a number of sectors that growth driver should be more domestic. So that's where the money or the smart money would go. So I think like,
So
the key takeaway.
X30, if Emma, if I could ask you related to that is assuming, making the assumption that oil prices remain elevated
Yes.
and remain elevated, meaning it's elevated and is there for quite a while, longer than I'd like to see. How does this impact that narrative, that strategy of infrastructure spending? How does that impact the deployment of funds and all that? Help me understand how higher oil prices impacts construction prices, which then feeds into sort of how the government deploys the funds for those projects.
Yes, I think the key baseline scenario for most of us at the moment is the oil price stay at like 90 for 2 months, so it's manageable. But if it's higher for longer, I mean 4 months at like 100, so it start to see the impact on the construction contractor, because you know that the logistic cost should be higher for a lot of big infrastructure project in Vietnam. And one of the big example at the moment is we host the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation Forum in 2027 in Phu Quoc, and it's in Iceland. So the cost of logistics for all the construction material and the construction cost is quite high. Sometimes it could be it hurts the contractor who are on the fixed contract or the lump sum contract. So that's when the government need to step in. And I think the Vietnamese government, they got a very good track record in price control and supporting the infrastructure construction, like they do during the COVID time. So I mean, if it need to stay the oil price, diesel price at the high level, I think the government need to step in to provide more support to the good thing in Vietnam is the room for the fiscal policy is ample, because our budget is well spend our fiscal money in that crisis.
Got it. And
If I can,
yeah,
Hung?
Yeah.
I was just going to ask Hung. I'm not hearing the government backing off the 10% growth target. Hung, are you hearing any hedging that maybe we can't hit 10% in the new environment, or is it still all forward?
I think it's like our like listed company like SSI when we making our plan. So it's just the Q1. So you cannot back off plan just in the Q1, right? So I think like maybe still there. I wasn't listening to that, but I think like the 10% story is there, and maybe along the way with our growth story, we may hit some like bumps and things like that, and maybe by then we we can think of it. Like last year when we got a very big typhoon, and that the government they may estimate that the impact on the GDP might be around 0.6 to 1% of GDP. So it means if we don't have that typhoon and the subsequent impact, the growth might not be that 8, they might be 8.5. And the situation here in Vietnam for 2026 may be the same. We still aim at like 10%, but along the way, if we hit some bump, so maybe 9%, not right from the Q1, I guess.
Barry, I think you've lived in Vietnam long enough, and in the 2 years that I've been back, I have to say to you that the Vietnamese, we are magical about making the impossible possible, And I love how X30 refers back to our firm, even with our chairman, if he sets a goal, he doesn't care the early bumps. You better still deliver the goods. So I can't imagine that our leadership is backing off of the 10%, So and I would not be surprised if for somehow, some way, we reach 10%. Is that right? Right, X30? That's just the will of the Vietnamese.
Agree.
Yeah. So I'm just again focusing on areas where if investors had the courage to be deploying funds, what just finish your thoughts on areas of interest for you to play this volatility.
Um, yes, I think the volatility in Vietnam stock market is extremely high, and for retail investor, I think they learn a lot from the last year with the tariff. So I think the reaction for this when we got the energy shock at the moment is much better than the last cycle, and they react quite soon. So that's why I think at the moment the market is doing relatively well after they learn a lot about selling off on the news might not make a lot of money. But for foreign investor, I think it's still about how you want to play a long-term story rather than like go with the very cyclical movement. We may have more patient capital, we can say it, like institutional investor going in and like a more buy and hold guy coming in and make the volatility become lesser. So that's what we hope for the second half of 2026 when we got more institutional investor coming in. And in Vietnam, I think the RSC, the State Security Vietnam, is very keen on build up the domestic fund, the asset management company domestically, because it could help to balance the volatility. And in terms of the central bank, I think there's a seminar yesterday, and the central bank representative did talk about they asked the commercial bank to build up some like hash tool, so for investor can hash the currency volatility, so it helped them to
point about the upcoming inclusion. Again, to remind everyone that Vietnam has already been upgraded, okay? And the next step is the actual implementation of that, which is including us in the indices. And X30, you bring up a very important point, because this type of money is all institutional, and it's all very long term, and it's passive. And what that means is that that money that's really targeting to be invested in Vietnam in September, frankly, doesn't care if oil prices is $100, $200, $20. It doesn't care if there's war in Iran. It doesn't care if tariffs is XYZ. It only cares that Vietnam has been upgraded, and that it's been upgraded by FTSE. And it will, if things go smoothly as we prepare for the implementation, it will definitively be put into Vietnam, and it will stay in Vietnam. So you actually bring up a very important point in terms of there are dynamics in our market right now that's going to create more stability looking forward if things go well. So thanks for bringing that point up. Look, we're running out of time. So I'm going to give Hưng, you and Barry and Frank maybe opportunities to ask each other any questions if you have any. And then, of course, I will have one final question for each of you. It's a similar question. It's sort of a prediction. So Barry, do you have any questions for Frank or Hưng that you want to throw out, or Hưng, do you have any questions for Frank? Because he's precious. We don't often get him calling in from DC all the time, so I want to take advantage of that.
I think he owed us a question on the duration of the market. Want to some kind of estimate on the duration of that? Yes.
X30, you stole my question. You stole my question. I was gonna make each of you bet
I'm very
that.
sorry. I'm very sorry.
Yeah, no worries. I love you. So let's go back to Frank. Now that I've given you some time to think, okay, what's your feeling here? And Frank, don't ruin my day, okay, man? At least don't hurt me by telling me it's gonna last for years.
I won't say it will last for years, but I'm telling you, Tom, it's the question that everybody is asking here, and they can't find a happy answer. So I think it's a couple of factors. I think it's one, at a certain point, the Iranian government has to think that the people can only put up with so much pounding of American bombing.
Yeah.
Right. And the Israelis have gone the extra step here, quite controversially, not only bombing Iranian oil facilities, but water facilities. And if you look up what's happened in Tehran over the last, I think, 2 years, just extraordinary historical drought, where you hear the stories of people in downtown Tehran would turn on the faucet and there no water would come out for hours. This went on for a long. So now you're destroying what water. So there may be an exhaustion point here that we cannot gauge, and I think that's probably a stronger than we know, where the Iranian government realizes the people just cannot take this anymore. Right? We're not. It's going to be absolute chaos. It won't even be any sort of organized revolution. It'll just be chaos. And that, I think that's a big. So that dictates this doesn't go on for years and probably doesn't go on for months.
Got it.
So I'm going to give it.
Okay. Barry. Now I have to give Barry credit, okay? Because when this hit, I said to the team that I think this is a blip, that Vietnam is so far away and so isolated from a lot of these issues for it to matter to us. But I think Barry nudged back on me, and so far you've been right, as I think that I underestimated the waves, the shock waves going around the world and ultimately impacting us here, Barry. Your guess, and based on the tea leaves in your eyes, how long does this last?
How long does it last?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really tough question. So I would, in relation to that, push back to what Frank said. Before this happened, the Iranian people were on the verge of rising up in revolution to the Islamic government.
Yeah.
Following this, do they hate their government more, or do they blame the United States? Are they burning American flags for bombing us? And does it actually cement the government's position? And because that comes, how long it lasts, like I said, if the Iranian people are really going to revolt, then I think that pushes the Iranian government to end it sooner, because I don't think Trump knows how to end it sooner. But I don't know, could drag on a lot. So I don't know. What do you think on that, Frank?
I think that that is a risk. I mean, I remember many years ago, and Barry and Tom, you will remember this because you were in the United States, the Mariel boat lift, when Cuba allowed Fidel Castro let tens of thousands of Cubans to leave. They all showed up on the shores of the United States. It was actually a brilliant strategic move by him, because he allowed anybody who was a potential protester, revolutionary, let's get rid of all the troublemakers. Anybody who wants democracy, go on. And anybody who stays is just going to be happy to go along. The Iranian, a lot of people in that country right now who are scared to rise up. And there are numerous verified reports that their secret police are out and have been effectively helping us, but maybe hurting us. And our government is doing the same. And the one other thing I'll say to this, from the economics, right? This is the worst performing currency in the world, the real, just horrific. It's pointless, useless. There's got to be zero imports coming into the country at this point. So again, you take a horrific car crash of an economy and you're now grinding it up to be something even worse. What is the government actually controlling? You're going to see mass migration of people trying to get out of there. It could be absolutely chaotic, something the government itself can't control. That may.
Well, look, time's run out. I want to wrap this up, and if I can wrap it up, which is my own reaction to this, I think, certainly for me, who's always optimistic, my nickname is Tommy the Bull, because I'm always bullish. My original view about this, it would be short-lived, and it would be yet another taco trade, and it may prove to be that, but in this moment, it seems much more complex. And Frank, I love the framework that you gave us early on in the conversation. Is there's perhaps two ways out. One is of Iran, and the other one, of course, is Beijing. I certainly hope it's not number one. And understanding how the Chinese view things globally and how long-term they are, that I hope that, number one, your framework is right, and that I will be looking and hoping that the conversation with President Xi and President Trump will find some way out that's much more strategic and that we can't see right now. So thank Frank for that. And then, to our listeners, as always, I want to thank you for your support. I want to thank our clients, our partners, our friends, even our competitors, our regulators for supporting SSI. This is our first webinar for the year. As you can see, SSI has incredible capabilities to provide really unique, timely, global insight, and we will continue to do so. For those of listeners who might have ongoing questions, please reach out to our sales team, and certainly we will get back to you in a timely fashion. With that, Frank, I love you. Thanks for staying up at night, always for supporting us.
Only for you, Tom. Only for you.
Yeah. You are amazing. You're amazing. And Barry, I love having you on the team. And X30, you are still the most handsome economist in the world. So with all that, guys, good night. Thank you.
Yeah. Good night.
Thanks.
All right, guys. Thank you.
Thank you very much.